Well, give a lot of credit. GW had to play 40 minutes of hard basketball, and that's what they did to beat the #1 team in the nation. Thompson the other way, lays it up and in.
Thompson will take a long three and got it. One-on-one. No, the shot.
Yeah, he's got it.
Oh, my goodness.
George Washington is the NIT champions.
Good evening from the GW men's basketball locker room, and welcome to Hoops in History, GW Athletics celebration of GW men's basketball with its incredible plays, unforgettable wins, and countless memories. Since 1906, and in facilities like Uline Arena, Fort Myer, and now the Charles D. Smith Center, GW students and alumni have come together to raise high the buff and blue in support of GW men's basketball players. Thank you so much for joining us as part of GW's bicentennial celebration. We're so excited to spend more time with some of GW's greatest student athletes so that they can share their stories and take your questions. But first, I'd like to introduce Jamie and Christian, the head coach of GW men's basketball.
Hello, everybody. What a privilege and honor it is to be here representing GW basketball family. Throughout this year, our university is celebrating our bicentennial, and we're so proud of GW men's basketball 107 season history as a driving force of school spirit and love for the university. In those 107 years, we've had 49 student athletes score 1,000 career points in buff and blue, and I'm sure we've got the 50th or more on our roster right now. We have our all-time leading scorer working hard every day to push and promote GW basketball. How many programs in the country have that? Their all-time leading scorer working every day. That's truly a family. I want to give a special thank you to Chris Monroe. Moments of triumph in our past are undeniable. The 1993 run to the Sweet 16, an unforgettable game against Michigan's Fab Five, an undefeated A-10 season in 2006 and a #6 ranking in the country, and most recently the 2016 NIT championship. This is a storied program that the men you hear from tonight built. We've also seen them go to the highest levels of our sport, from Red Auerbach becoming as synonymous with the game of basketball as anybody, to more recently with 5 GW guys in the NBA in the 2000s, plus dozens more in the top leagues around the world. We're also mindful, though, that these successes can't always mask our challenges, as we know we've endured some lows, and we're committed to embracing our challenges and getting better every day because of them. That is made possible by the support of our AD, Tanya Vogel, and many others within the GW community. This love and passion has us poised to add accolades, championships, and unforgettable moments in the near future. I'd also like to recognize our current players watching and learning about this esteemed history that they will forever be a part of. You now carry the torch for all those represented here and those beyond. Carry it with pride and for something bigger than yourself. With that, I'm turning it back over to Dave Earl. Raise high.
Thanks so much, Coach. And I'm really excited to start our discussion of some of the great players and the great people of the GW men's basketball program with a man who in 1967 left Lexington, Kentucky and decided to transfer from the University of Kentucky and make his place in Foggy Bottom. And save for a brief stint in the ABA, for all intents and purposes, Bob Talent has never really left. And Coach Talent, I'm really excited to bring you into the conversation right now to talk about your time, your one exceptional season as a GW men's basketball player, where you averaged more than 25 points a game. You were 5th in the nation in scoring, and your incredible journey here at GW basketball. Additionally, we're really excited to have, you're the greatest assistant coach possible, Eileen Talent, who I know you met at GW, helping you out with the broadcast today. Coach, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Good to be here. I need all the help I can get.
You and me both, Coach. Coach, I think we should really start with the beginning. You came here in 1967 and kind of on a lark, decided to choose George Washington men's basketball as your next destination for your final season of eligibility. What was it that brought you to GW?
Couple of things. When I left Kentucky, I only had 1 year left. I was built in, and Rupp pretty much told me I couldn't go to the SEC school or Louisville. So I was looking around, and I was in engineering, so I had to find a school that had a good engineering program. And I called Lefty Drizel. He was at Davidson at the time, and he recruited me real heavily, but they didn't have engineering. And then I talked to the Virginia Tech guys because they had recruited me. They had a good engineering school, but then I had a friend that lived up here in D.C., Nick Turner, and he knew the basketball coach, Wayne Dobbs, real well. And so they came down to Maytown to watch Mike play in the regional finals. And I was there at the time. And, they had a pretty good deal. They stretched out. They said, listen, if you come to GW, the year you sit out, we'll let you coach the freshman team. And the next year you can play with your brother. And so it sounded pretty good. And I went back to, school, and about 2 weeks later, my dad called me and said, that sounds like a good thing for you to do. Plus, you can keep your eye on Mike. He thought Mike was a little wild. So anyway, Mike was probably going to Louisville or Vanderbilt, but he hadn't made his decision yet. So I kind of talked him into it, to be honest with you. And I said, Mike, man, why don't you come back with me? And, Mike said, okay. Now, neither one of us had visited the school at the time.
So, Coach, I remember you telling me about that before, and tell me about when you realized, or tell me about that drive to campus, and what your first impressions were, or weren't, at the George Washington University.
Yeah, well, I was 21, and I didn't really want to visit the school. I mean, I've been through all that. Mike said, I'm going to D.C. anyway on a senior trip, and Coach Dobbs picked him up and took him around campus, he said. So anyway, we came up in September, and we drove up. And we took a left on 22nd Street off Constitution Avenue about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Traffic was unbelievable. And Mike is the map. He's got the map over there. I said, Mike, where are we? He said, according to this map, we're in the middle of campus. And I said, wow, this is the campus. I said, I thought Coach Dobbs took you to the campus. He said, oh, he did, but it looked different. Well, we got here, and the best part of it, we got situated. Coaches came over, and it was good. And then the first day there, we saw all these write-ups. They said, listen, come to the gym tonight, all incoming freshmen and transfer students. We'll have a party. So we go over there, and man, the 10 Tabernacle had plastic on the floor because they were going to have registration the next day. And one of the players was riding a motorcycle in the 10 Tabernacle, and they had 20 cases of beer on the wall, sit up. And Mike looked at me and said, we definitely picked the right school.
Well, and so, Coach, you came in, you averaged more than 25 points a game. Mike came in, and Mike was one of the top scorers in the conference in the Atlantic 10. And then you had another brother, Pat Talent, come in, and I believe he's in the top 10 all time in scoring at George Washington University. So when Coach Dobbs decided to come down and take a look at Mike Talent, he had no idea what legacy he was creating in terms of men's basketball players. And then we ended up getting also a head coach out of the deal in you as well.
Well, it turned out really well, obviously. GW is a great school, and I was very fortunate to get to coach that freshman team. I had, Walt Zerbiak and Ralph Barnett and Mike Talent. I mean, we were great. We were 17-2. And it taught me so much to coach. I mean, it made me understand the game much better because I had to figure out what the forwards and the centers did. And so that helped me the next year as a player. So it worked out, perfectly for us.
Coach, we're going to actually bring Walt Zerbiak in just a moment, but what I wanted to sort of talk to you about is you've been a mainstay previously in the 10 Tabernacle in Fort Myer, and then going forward into the Charles E. Smith Center, which you opened as a head coach, if I remember correctly. And you pretty much have, whether it's as a coach or as a fan and a supporter of the program, you've pretty much never left. And I just would love to ask for your thoughts on when you've seen the evolution of the program over the last 50 some years. Talk to me about what you've observed and what has kept kept you coming back for more with GW men's basketball?
We've seen lots of things. It's been a long time. When we first got to GW, they had won, Mike and I and Walt, they had won 3, 6, and 5 the previous 3 years. They had won 14 games, and we won the very next year. We won 15 games, and so we started bringing back. GW was great in the 50s, big time, and then we started bringing them back at that point. And then we had some good years. When some of the teams that I coached were really good, that team in 1975, 76 was 20-7. And the only teams we lost to were teams in the top 20. Had some great players on that team. And then, of course, Mike Jarvis's stay at GW was just amazing, those teams that we had. And then Coach Hobbs has some tremendous players, obviously, as we know. And Mike Lonergan, he has some wonderful teams. And then who knows what happened, but all of a sudden, things changed. And it's been a very, very tough road since then, since winning the NIT. Walt was up there with, it was a fabulous thing. It was so good. And then all of a sudden, the coach is gone. So it's been tough. I feel sorry for the coaches nowadays, because we still have a bad reputation. And I know that because I hear it. And they have to put up with it.
What's been impressive, and I think as an alum and as someone who's been following the program as long as I have, GW does have a tendency to be able to sort of rebuild itself and reinvent itself. And, it's sustaining that process that can sometimes be a challenge. But, you see those moments where things are starting to build back up and do it again. And we're feeling optimistic that Coach Christian is going to bring in that next era. And Coach, there's a lot that I want to talk to you about. But first and foremost, I know that we talked about it earlier today. What I do want to also make sure that we acknowledge is Mike Talent did pass earlier this year or just this past summer. I want to make sure that and that your family knows that we're all thinking of the Talent family. And Mike was a passionate alum and a dedicated supporter and a heck of a basketball player. And we're all thinking of you and the family.
I appreciate it. This is a big loss, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But we're getting over it.
Yeah. Coach, I've got so many things when we kind of bring everyone together at the end. I want to talk to you a little bit about the legacy of Red Auerbach and how he was an influence on you and the rest of the program. But I do want to give us the opportunity, if you don't mind, to bring in Walt Zerbiak to talk with us next. And Coach, we'll bring you back in momentarily. And as we get ready to bring in Walt Zerbiak, I also want to let everyone know who's on the call right now. We are excited to take your questions. We'll be taking them at the end with all of our guests together and sort of bringing all the panel together at one time. Bring them into the Q&A box here on your Zoom screen. And at this time, Walt, are you ready to join in with us? As Walt gets himself situated, Walt Zerbiak, Coach Talent, had mentioned previously. There you are, Walt. So, Walt, you were a member of that. You got to know Coach Talent as a member of that freshman team that he coached prior to your varsity season. And you played with folks the likes of Ronnie Nunn and some extraordinarily talented people, Mike Talent as well, and had yourself a heck of a career at George Washington. And Walt, I'll start with the same question for you that I asked Coach Talent. What was it that brought you to GW?
What brought me to GW was my first visit. I had never flown on an airplane, and they flew me into Washington, and it was so breathtaking to see the Capitol, to see the White House from the airplane, as we landed in Virginia there. And, the coaches, Coach Guthrie, as well as Coach Dobbs, they were very, very convincing in their argument that I could have been an important piece of that team. And I was really overtaken. I didn't want to stay home. I sort of wanted to get away from home. I was also recruited by Pitt a little bit and Duquesne, but I decided I want to go home. And sincerely, Coach Guthrie and Coach Dobbs really seemed interested in me. And I really felt that, competitively, I was a very confident basketball player. And I felt that I can come in and I felt that I could do the job. And I was lucky enough to have Bob as my freshman coach because he was a coach who coached the Kentucky style. He liked to run a lot. I loved to play basketball up tempo. And I think we had a great chemistry on that freshman team, as the results showed. You know, we were 17-2, beating the likes of Georgetown, and I think both times, and I think we might have beat Maryland both times. I think we only lost to Richmond twice. That's the only team we lost to.
Well,
And
every time
remember,
someone mentions beating Georgetown, my heart flutters a little bit. So that's music to my ears.
I remember getting the basketball magazines, and the basketball magazines in the 3 years previous to our arrival, Bob's arrival, was first in war, first in peace, last in the Southern Conference. That's what it became every single year. And as Bob said, they had 2 wins one year, 3 wins another year. I think the year before Bob, I think they might have had 6 wins, if I'm not mistaken.
So, Coach, you talk a little bit about the style that really got you kind of amped up for your varsity career. What are some of the moments and some of the games and people? What are some of your best memories of being a student athlete at GW and being a part of sort of watching the evolution of the program into a real competitor in a grueling Southern Conference?
Yeah, we were in the Southern Conference for 2 of my varsity years. Then we became an independent in the 3rd year.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Well, one of the main things that really influenced me was meeting my wife. That really, completely changed my outlook and completely changed my experience at George Washington. My sophomore year, I didn't play much. I really had to work hard because I wasn't the fastest guy. I wasn't the highest jumper, but I really felt that I had game. I felt I could shoot. I felt I had great instincts on the boards. I felt I had great instincts getting offensive boards, which I think what meshed very well with Bob and Mike talent, because they were great shooters, but you also needed somebody that was going to be getting offensive rebounds when those shots weren't going in. And plus, offensive rebounds always help your shooting percentage because you're getting a lot of shots that are right at the rim. But I was really proud of the fact that we were able to get the school out of the doldrums that they were in. And that was one of the reasons I was really looking forward to going to George Washington. I remember we were trying to also recruit the likes of Corky Calhoun. I remember we were one of the last ones on his list. And I thought we had the potential to be really, really good. The only thing is, we had injuries that hurt us in key moments of the season. Like Mike didn't play my senior year. We had great aspirations with Mike and Ronnie Nunn in the backcourt. That would have really helped. And when you take a scorer and a player as smart as Mike was, it's taking a lot away from the team. One of the things that we were probably missing that later on came with Clyde Burwell was a shot blocking center. And I think with the shot blocking center, you can deal with the likes of a guy like Mike Malloy, who played at Davidson. And he actually made Davidson one of the top 5 or 6 teams in the country because he was an active 6'8", 6 guy that had bouncy legs and, very active, getting a lot of stuff inside. And I think a lot of times he was the difference maker. I think if we would have been lucky enough to have a player like that, we probably could have went from 11 or 12 wins to maybe 16 or 17 wins because it makes that much of a difference.
Well, what I also want to make sure that folks know about you is that you were a real trailblazer as an American basketball player in the ACB and had an extensive and lengthy career in Spain, both as a player and also as an ambassador for the game. And while I'm really looking forward to being able to talk with you a little bit about that, especially because Tyler Kavanaugh playing in Tenerife right now in the Spanish professional leagues, you sort of were a trailblazer for players going overseas from George Washington University and having an outstanding career. And Walt, thank you so much. We're going to bring you back in
People
just a little while.
Forget that I used George Washington University to trampoline myself to play a year in the ABA. I had a good year in the ABA with the Pittsburgh Condors, but then the Condors folded, and then I was picked up by the Kentucky Colonels. I had a good camp, but unfortunately they didn't have any slots open. And I actually played in the Eastern League and won a championship in the Eastern League, which is what propelled my name to be out there for teams interested. I actually had interest from the Buffalo Braves, who offered me a 1-year guaranteed contract. And I turned it down because when I tried out against the University of Indiana in a tryout game, Bobby Knight's team was over there on tour. I had a wonderful game in which I had like a 32-point game, and I was playing Rucker style basketball because I had been playing with Julius Erving in the Rucker that summer. Yep. And I was really, my confidence was really at a high peak. So, and from that game, Real Madrid offered me a 5-year no-cut contract that I had to decide whether to give up my NBA dream or take the 5 years more of security. So I signed with Real Madrid for those 5 years.
And it was
eventually lasted 7.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, sir. We're going to bring you in momentarily.
Sure.
And that sort of talks a little bit about the 70s here with GW men's basketball. And now I'd like to bring in the new Washington monument, as he was well known. Mike Brown was the first signature recruit coming in during the Jerry Gimelstob era of GW men's basketball in the 1980s. The guy coming in from North Jersey, as all great GW alumni do, like me and you. We come from Jersey, and we make a difference here in GW. And then Mike, you were an absolute stud at George Washington. You went on to have an illustrious NBA career, including, having a guy by the name of Michael Jordan naturally play second fiddle to you with the Chicago Bulls, among other places. Mike, thank you so much for being a part of this. And I'll jump in with the same question I asked for a lot of folks. Can you tell us a story about what made you want to come to George Washington?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me. And first, hey, I want to say, hola there to Walt and Coach Talent, all those GW guys. Yeah, we got the young guys on, but those guys laid that foundation, and glad to be able to to see them via Zoom.
Absolutely.
And as far as coming to GW, similar to the Coach Talent there, the fact that I signed to go to GW without visiting campus yet. And it just happened to work that way. It had a great conversation there, blueprint, so to speak, with Coach Gimelstob, and he laid it on the line for me. And I liked what I heard and decided to go to GW. And then later on, about 4 or 5 days later, I was able to kind of make my visit. And as far as Walt there, Walt got a chance to fly in and see the great capital of, our nation there. I caught the train. So I jumped on the Amtrak and came on down from Newark and was able to come down and had a great, great visit. Campus is right in the city, not typical of your campus that you're going to see the big quad and green everywhere and trees. No, it was right in the city. And it wasn't a hard adjustment for me. And I had mentioned to you before, I said one of the things that was really impressed me at GW was that when I went through the dorms, and since the majority of them were former hotels and apartment buildings, it impressed me that I was able to have a bathroom in my room. And so I was like, okay, I'm signing, just give me the paper and the pen.
Mike, there's two real things I want to cover with you before before I lose you here. The first one is, from talking to you, my understanding is that it might be your fault that GW doesn't play Georgetown anymore. And can you tell us a little bit about what scared Coach Thompson away from playing against George Washington anymore?
Well, I tell you, the year before I got there, Wilbur Skipper, Penny Elliott, Curtis, another Jersey guy. They went down to GW they ended up going, I believe, an overtime game against Georgetown. So now this is the last, when I come in as a freshman, that's the last game of the back-to-back, or the contract that they had. So we go, we're playing them, we're on the road, I believe it's the Capitol Center, and I ended up, having a good game, outscored and out-rebounded Pat. We ended up losing by, I think, 7 or 8.
Pat is, of course, Patrick Ewing.
Patrick Ewing, yes. And so that was the end of it. Actually, GW was getting fairly close. And the Coach Thompson is like, hey, what I'm trying to do down here, it's too much to risk being chance to, losing the G-Dub. So that was the end of it. So, I was sad that we lost, but I could see that we were, getting better and making some attention, especially in that DMV. There's such a packed, powerhouse with high school basketball and D1 basketball. It's a great hub. So we was beginning to make a little noise.
And Mike, I highly recommend Coach Thompson references in his book about that calculus of it's time to stop playing the likes of George Washington and Maryland. He doesn't mention you by name, but I know in his heart of hearts, he knows it's all your fault. But the other book, for the reading list for GW basketball fans, there's a book called Let Me Tell You a Story by John Feinstein talking about Red Auerbach. And Red was someone who has more NBA rings than he had fingers and toes between his time as a head coach and as a leader in the front office of the Boston Celtics. But from talking to you, your story with Red Auerbach is about as clear-cut as I've seen of his continued investment and involvement with GW men's basketball coaches and players. Can you talk to me a little bit about how he prepared you for a long and successful career in the NBA?
Yes, Red reached out to me when I decided to go to GW. I'm coming out of high school, and he says, "Hey, I want to get you, throw you right in the water, get your feet wet." So he set up for me to go up to Boston and to work at camp. So what they would do is that the Celtics had a camp for kids during the day, and then at night, the Celtics would practice, and I was allowed to practice with them. So I would go up, referee, coach the young kids, get my feet wet that way, and then practice with them at night. And I really got my first taste coming out of high school. It says, oh my goodness, these are grown men. And it was a great confidence builder because they were stronger, but I was able to run the floor. I'm always, hustle guy, get on the glass, got a couple of things, putbacks. So it was a great confidence builder. And then I had chance, Red invited me again to do the same thing my junior year. And that was when I really said, hey, I belong, and really flourished, and then was able to have that confidence, transfer over, to GW in the Atlantic 10 and be able to have some good production in the Smith Center there.
And then you went on to play for a GW alum as the owner of the Chicago Bulls and Jerry Reinsdorf. And
yes.
Now in your work in Las Vegas, working with rookies in the NBA, you've had the opportunity to counsel folks like Yuta Watanabe and Tyler Kavanaugh and Patricio Garino. And so the GW alumni community runs real strong for you, both in the collegiate and professional ranks, Mike. So that's really exciting.
Yes, I enjoyed that little player development. And when I saw those guys, I made sure that, hey, I reached out to them and said, hey, welcome. It's a hard journey. You work really hard to get here, and also stay focused in summer league. I was telling them, because all eyes are on you. Yep. It's not necessarily this team that you're with right now in summer league. Everyone is looking at you. Teams that you're playing against, other NBA teams, rest of the world, and the fact that you're here in Vegas for summer league means that you're the top talent, on the planet right now.
Mike, I want to thank you so much. We're going to bring you back in because a number of our fans have questions about you and your experience as that new Washington monument. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the 90s of GW basketball. Starting with just right above me in the Charles E. Smith Center, there was a man by the name of Kwame Evans sitting up on the rim, looking down on the GW fans, overtaking the floor after defeating number 1 UMass. And if you looked right up straight ahead of him in the boxes, there was Bill Clinton and Chelsea Clinton giving him the thumbs up for that unforgettable game. Kwame's career also included a run to the Sweet 16. He's not able to join us tonight, but we did have the opportunity to catch up with him to learn some more about his experience as part of GW's Hoops in history.
I chose GW because, the guys that Von Jones and Ika Dare, we actually played together, I believe it was a Capital Classic. So the coaching staff was great. They kind of made me feel extremely comfortable with them. Coach Jarvis, at the time, he came and visited me in my home in Baltimore before I chose GW. And he just, he sold it to me. And the vision that he had for where the program was going, I wanted to be a part of that because I felt like it was going to be special. And exactly what happened was it turned out to be special. I mean, we made the tournament, the NCAA tournament 3 out of the 4 years. Just some memories that you can't, forget. It was just a lot that you take now, and you don't really realize how important it was back then to see all those special things that that we went through back then, and the memories just keep going on and on. Yeah, I believe I was one of the first guys, for Baltimore to actually, go to GW. But GW is a great place. It's close to home. It's like being away, but it's also like if you have to get back home, see family for a minute, whatever the case may be. It's just an hour away. I think Shantay, Follow, and Mike King, and we came all from the same Rex, and a lot of people don't know that. Like we all went to we played at Cecil Kirk, me, Shantay, Mike King. They was a little bit after me, but we still played against each other. So them guys seen the success that I had, and I think it was a no-brainer to play some great basketball. Atlantic 10 was tough back then. You had all those great teams in that conference, and the competition was, every game was a challenge for us. So it's just a great situation to be so close, to GW, coming up. I would have to say the UMass game, and only because I think the atmosphere is electric. You had Bill Clinton come to watch the game. I think that's the most memorable game for me. It was just crazy in the building and we happened to get the win against I believe they was number 1 in the country at that time. So it was amazing, simply to put it.
There's a clip of you sitting on the rim waving a towel in the air. Talk to me about that feeling of looking down and seeing all the students down on the court, you sitting on the rim. Bill Clinton is literally giving you the thumbs up from up on the concourse. Talk to me about like that feeling in that moment in that game.
That was just like a spur of the moment type of thing. The crowd was running on to the court, and I just jumped on the rim for some reason. I don't know what made me do it, but it was kind of it turned out to be cool. Just the whole atmosphere. Did you just grab the
rim and do a pull-up? Did you literally pull yourself up?
I pulled myself up. I think somebody was helping me get up there, and then, it just happened to be a great scene for that day. And, it's a lasting memory for me. I always go back and look at me just, holding my hands up and pure joy of beating those guys and sitting on that rim. GW changed me. It taught me how to be a young man working and doing the things the right way, be successful. It's hard work being a basketball player, but GW, you kind of set the standard because academic excellence, school, it's just a atmosphere where you have to do everything right. I think that's what GW represents. Not just being a basketball player, but also being good at academics, for the community. It just sets the standard.
And at this time, I'd like to welcome to the conversation Tanya Vogel, the Director of Athletics here at George Washington University, a contemporary of Kwame's and on campus for a good number of special teams to help us remember one of Kwame's teammates.
Thank you, Dave. Tonight, as we celebrate our history and we recognize the greats that have worn the GW uniform, we need to take a minute and pause. We lost one of our own. One of my classmates, one of Kwame's teammates, Daryl Collette, passed away this week. Daryl leaves behind his wife, Lori, and daughter Cadence. I will share today at the office, my phone continued to buzz as pictures and memories were passed through a group text. Daryl was larger than life. He was one of our favorite 7-footers, And as he walked down the street, he just had a smile that could lift you out of anything that you were dealing with. Daryl was also a very active and enthusiastic Caps fans. One of my favorite pictures that was sent to me today was with Daryl and a bunch of our alumni together at a Caps game recently, pre-COVID. As you may know, Daryl was a member of the Sweet 16 team, and he just shared his love with his infectious smile. So I ask that we take a few moments tonight to pause and recognize Daryl Collette. Thank you. Hey, Dave, before I send it back, I do want to share an observation as somebody that was smashed into Smith Center for that UMass game and probably on the floor with Kwame looking down at me. One of the things that I saw in that team and also similarly when Tyler was here was this first in, last out mentality when it came to the gym. They were truly gym rats. They were always getting up shots. I think Tyler probably closed down Smith Center while he was here. And one of the things that excites me the most is that in James Bishop, Ricky Lindo, and this past year with Matthew Moyer, those are first in, last out guys. And as Jamian continues to reveal who will be on the court wearing our uniform in 2021, I guarantee that Ricky and James will teach them that first in and last out mentality. I keep telling Jamian I can't wait for November. And he reminds me, listen, we need the summer. We didn't get the summer last year. So I guarantee we'll have a team that you can all be proud of with that first in and last out mentality. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And we're going to keep moving on through the 90s right now. And one of the absolute members of Mount Rushmore of GW men's basketball was a 5'4" point guard by the name of Shantay Rogers. Shantay's career created some incredible memories, had a lot of opportunities for him to fill his own trophy case in a number of NCAA tournaments. He and I spoke earlier this week talking about his memories of GW basketball.
No, I had a former player, a close friend, like a family to me, Kwame Evers. He was already here, and GW had some success prior to me coming to GW. So that was a plus too. We grew up at Cecil Creek Recreation Center in Baltimore, so we already had a prior relationship. He was a little older, and I got a chance to still play with them at a young age. Man, senior day it was amazing. I had all my family and friends, old coaches, my kids, mom, dad, everybody was in attendance, and I was down. I was down. So I was down, probably a week prior to that game. And I know it was senior day, and I probably wasn't going to be able to play no more games from the Smith Center. So, I had to come out there and play in that game. But the last 40, we knew it was going to come down to me and Diego in the pick and roll situation. Any of us me or him was going to get that last shot. Me or Diego was going to get that last shot. Tom Penders drew a good play up with pick and roll with isolation with just me and him on one side. It just so happened that, James Posey and them, they switched. They switched out. So I tried to, go inside the Diego for the mismatch. He kind of threw it back out to him. I had to rush the shot up. But, the unsung hero of the team all year was Mike King. He got that rebound. Got the ball out to me, and, the rest was history. I hit that game-winning shot. I'm not going to lie. The building was rocking. The fans, everybody was coming out. So when I see today, I'll be looking for that same atmosphere. The Smith Center we need to bring that same atmosphere that I had when I was there. The Smith Center was rocking. It was always crowded. I think I played my first game against St. Bonaventure there, and it was rocking. It was a snowstorm out. The Smith Center was rocking. I mean, I wouldn't change being at the Smith Center for nothing. It groomed me real well. It groomed me I didn't know what my future was going to hold. I was there playing with a lot of international guys like Yegor, Francisco, a lot of foreigners, and I became one of them. You know, I went abroad, which I wouldn't change that either. I went abroad, got a chance to, you know, meet some great people abroad, love it over there, and I became who my teammates were. I became one of them, and it was just a wonderful feeling. So I kind of understand what they was going through and the journey that they took, and you know, and I was just so excited about it. I mean, the people that came before, like I said, the Kwamings and stuff like that, to give us some insight on what we was going to be going into. We right there in the city. We right there where the president be at. We right there in the nation's capital. So, you know, it's we right next to Georgetown. It was GW is just it's a special place, and you only would if you come there, you go to school there. I really can't really say it in so many words. You just gotta be there to really feel it. You gotta be there, because you know you got all these other schools like the Marylands and Georgetowns around, but GW is like a hidden power. It's like a hidden lower power that, you know, only the people that go there that you can experience it. That's when you're gonna know that, you know, you pick the right spot. You pick a good spot at that. I picked the right spot for me.
As Shantay Rogers, one of the legends of Baltimore and then of the Charles E. Smith Center, was departing Foggy Bottom, a young man by the name of Chris Monroe was making his commitment to staying home in the DC metro area. And I think folks knew that he was an extraordinarily talented young man. I don't know if folks knew that when Chris Monroe first stepped out on the court, he would become GW's all-time leading scorer. And I'm very proud to call him a friend and a colleague today. And I'd love to welcome Chris Monroe into the conversation to kick us off on sort of commemorating the 2000s in Foggy Bottom. Chris, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
I got to ask you the same question I asked everyone else. You stayed home. There was a lot of people who wanted your services around college basketball, and you decided to head right down the road to the Smith Center. What was that about for you, and why did you choose to stick around?
Well, I always knew that I was going to stay home. For me, it was always going to be the Maryland, Georgetown, and GW. And at the time, you know, coming out of school, you know, I was a big community guy. So I wanted everybody to be able to come to my games and get on the metro and get off at Foggy Bottom and be able to catch my games. And I used to, one of the main reasons was a good friend of mine, Ronnie Roman, who I used to go drive back to the neighborhood, bring him in. He was in a wheelchair. He used to sit side. We used to play as kids, and he used to sit side by side and on the sidelines to watch me play. So I was going to come to GW or Maryland or GW. But when Tom Penders brought me on campus and I got to meet some of the alums and some of the people around the program, guys such as Leroy Charles and Karen Urkel and those people, you know, Karen showed me a future for myself academically, and Leroy showed me from a mental standpoint a way outside of basketball. And Penders had everything I needed as far as basketball on the court. He played the style I liked, and so I was like, this is perfect. It's a match made in heaven.
And Chris, for you, you know, when we look at sort of the history of GW basketball in the 2000s, some of the best moments arrived as sort of the cavalry was coming in to support you, right? You were an upperclassman with a very young Pop Spencer-Bonsu, a very young Mike Hall, a very young TJ Thompson. What was it like for you, both as a student athlete, right, developing and sort of showing those guys the way, and then now in your role here, being a mentor and a friend for GW's student athletes of today?
I mean, my mentorship started early. You come when the transition with Penders and Hobbs, it was Rocky. Came in, I had a bunch of young guys that didn't really know the way. TJ is going to go into probably some stories about it. Him a hard time, but I knew TJ since we were kids, so we played AAU together. So, but that mentorship, that level there, it traveled with me throughout my career. And so one of the reasons I decided to come back to GW and want to be a part of the program and a part of the department is that I wanted somebody, I wanted somebody like myself to be there. When I was at GW as a senior, I wish I had a Shantay on staff. I wish I would have had a Mike Brown there. I wish I would have had someone on administration that I can talk to and talk about all my aspirations, talk about how to connect with alumni and mentors, how should I talk with agents? How should I talk, the next step in life? And so when I had the opportunity to come back and I sat down and went to lunch with the AD, and then, from there, I told him my goal, and also to show any coach that comes into this, the department as a head coach, that, hey, I'm gonna be a resource for you. I think that education is something that GW is a pillar that GW stands on, and for a coach to walk into any kid's couch and sit on their cell phone house visit and say, hey, let me introduce you to Chris. And what I could say to this kid without lying to him and look their parents dead in the eye and say, hey, GW, after I finished playing professional ball, gave me an opportunity to come back to school and get my master's degree and work at the university. That says a lot. Not a lot of countries, not a lot of programs in the country are going to be able to do that for you, and also will be able to connect you to alumni. So, that's where the mentorship shop, and I wanted to be a mentor to the current guys. So if you hear from Tyler and Mo, Creed, and these guys, they're all going to tell you I'm in their life one way or another.
And Chris, what if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask you to step aside just for a moment so that we can bring in TJ Thompson, one of those guys who you knew for a very long time coming up in DC, in the DC metro area, a guy who stuck with the program during a coaching change, just as you did, right? With moving from coaches Penders to Hobbs. And I'd like to bring in TJ Thompson. Chris, we're going to bring you in a moment. And TJ, as you get ready to join us, I want to make sure folks know we're going to get to questions as soon as we can. Please drop them in the Q&A box and we'll be able to ask those momentarily. But TJ, thank you so much for joining us. And for you, we talked a little bit about that sort of transition. TJ, you were sort of that first guy in that transition period to sort of see the mountaintop. Coming out of DC and the DC Metro. Can you talk a little bit about that journey of you were recruited by Tom Penders, you ended up playing for Carl Hobbs, and that process from going from choosing GW to becoming a nationally ranked program and winning your first ever A10 championship. Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
It was a very unique journey because, like you said before, like I went from talking to Coach Penders daily and being extremely excited to play for him and to be very excited about starting the rebuild, getting back to the glory days. And then out of nowhere, under some circumstances happened and I wasn't able to play for him. So then Coach Hobbs came in, and that was, I didn't know him from anything. I was a little bit nervous, to be honest with you, when the change came, but it ended up being the best thing for me. And I think, and I say that because like Coach Hobbs, he did a masterful job of creating a culture. He did a masterful job of creating accountability. He did a masterful job of teaching us how to be great basketball players, but even better men. And once I saw what his vision was, once I saw what he was about, and once I saw his passion to make us get to that level, I bought in from the get-go. It was very rough in the beginning. Like Chris could tell you, my freshman year, I think it was Chris's junior year, we started out 10-3, and then we ended up losing 12 games in a row. And that was tough. You know what I mean? That was tough. We got humbled a little bit. It was welcoming me to college basketball, but that also showed me that what I had to do to get better and to help lead the program. And then Coach Hobbs and even Coach Pico, to an extent, did an unbelievable job of keeping us, keeping our eyes on the prize and just taking it step by step, because you're not going to change Rome in a day. You know what I mean? You got to set it block by block by block. And the foundation that they laid out and the blueprint that they gave us was phenomenal.
You know, I had the opportunity to talk to Pops Mensah-Bonsu a little bit before we got started, and he told me to shout out Tiny Jordan. But TJ, he said that what you had done for that program as well was you taught those guys how to sort of elevate their game and show them what hard work looked like. And he said that one of the things you always told Pops was, if I find daylight, I'm gonna throw that ball, and you better go get up and get it and put it in the basket. Can you talk about the team that you helped bring in. You had that coming out party, right, with that BB&T Classic where you beat Michigan State and you beat Maryland. You became nationally ranked, and that was the first of what would be 3 straight NCAA championship or tournaments rather. Can you sort of talk about that mentality and what brought those? What helped you lead that team in a way to sort of the glory days of the mid 2000s?
Sacrifice and belief. I think those were the two things, and also like believing in each other. Like we all sacrificed because we knew we all had a common goal, and the common goal was we wanted to do something that's never been done in the history of GW, and that's win the Atlantic 10 tournament championship, right? But we all knew that as individuals, we weren't going to be able to get that done. But we knew that if we all played a piece of the pie, then the whole pie would come together and we would be able to do it. So when I say like sacrifices, like we didn't care who scored the most points. We didn't care who got the headlines. What we cared about is enjoying each other's company, enjoying the game, and then embracing the expectations and the grind of it all. Like we knew that if we could all come together, and we knew that if we can all be one, that we could do something very, very special. And then we had guys that had good personalities, and they believed in the vision. So that made it a lot easier. And then also we just knew that the one thing that we were going to do is we were going to have fun. Like if you're not having fun, then the journey is going to be rough. And with my personality, and then obviously with Pops's personality, like we were a bunch of little kids, but we were kids on a grind, and we had kids that had a vision and that we wanted to see that vision all the way through. And fortunately for us, we did. So.
Well, TJ, we're going to try to get what little time we can left for questions. I want to show our fans 2 more videos, but before we do that, congratulations, TJ, to you and to Coach Hobbs and to Coach Peichel for what you guys achieved, bringing Rutgers back to the NCAA tournament and winning a game. We're all extremely proud of you for what you accomplished up there, and we're happy to see some of the magic that you brought to Foggy Bottom now happening at the RAC. So congratulations, and we'll talk to you in a couple moments in the questions.
Thank you.
What we want to do is Maurice Creek and Tyler Kavanaugh are 2 extraordinary men's basketball players who, along with Isaiah Armwood and a number of others, became transfers. Bob Talent, we talked about prior, but these were high impact transfers who, after seeing what things were like on the other side, decided that Foggy Bottom was the type of program that they wanted to be a part of. And between Maurice Creek bringing the team to its NCAA to the NCAA tournament, and Tyler Kavanaugh helping lead the team to an NIT championship, those guys had an absolutely incredible impact in the 2010s on the GW men's basketball program. They're playing overseas right now, and we decided not to wake them up in the middle of the night in Romania and in Spain, but we do have 2 great videos from them to show you right now.
What was special about George Washington was the players there. I didn't really know too much about the program. I didn't really know too much about the university or anything. I kind of learned everything in the summertime, but the players and the coaching staff were so welcoming, and I got to like those guys immediately, just by them welcoming me into their program without even committing to them yet, and me being a senior and everybody's looking up to me and Zeke and up to bring in a great year, and to have young guys with us that's got the same mindset to win at all costs and to to make it to the NCAA tournament. It was a great feeling. I felt that it was real, and we worked our butts off to even get to the tournament, and we made it there. It's a story behind why that shot was really significant for me. So before I put my name in the transfer pool, I knew I was going to do it. George Washington came 3rd, but I didn't know anything about George Washington. I wanted to go to Maryland. So I was supposed to do a workout with Maryland, I think, well before my decision to even pick a school. That workout never happened. So when I felt as if I was more so disrespected, I felt as if not only was disrespected at that point. But before I picked Indiana to even commit, my scholarship was handed off to somebody else before I could even commit to Maryland. That's why honestly, I told Coach, like, it was like in a respectful way, but I need this shot. And I told him, I want that shot, and if I get this shot, I'm ending the game. I always had animosity against Maryland because it was history from 2008 to 2013, 14 when I had taken that shot. So it felt great to me because I know in the back of their minds that they should have given me a shot. I know in the back of any and everybody's minds who's, like I said, who's doubted me in the past, or I didn't get my shot to even play in certain years and stuff like that. It comes about, hey, I go to a program, George Washington, and this is for the whole team. I come to a team that I know barely anything about. We're 24-9 in 1 year. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's more so like who you got on that floor, and if that person can play and, you know what I'm saying, be a help to your team, then you might want to not overlook him. My other goal was to have a great year, to put GW on a map, because nobody knows about George Washington for basketball ever since 2007. You know what I'm saying? So that was the last time they've been to a tournament. And I knew that. Yep. Coming in. It was already set in stone, like, I'm putting them on the map. This team is going on the map. If me and Zeke, I know Zeke's going to back me up. I know these young guys can play. If me and Zeke go out there and do what we got to do as seniors, we both took that role as if we was a father figure to them. We was the extra coach on the floor for them, you know? Yep. Those guys that tell you all the time, I'm always talking to them on the floor. They might get annoyed sometimes by me talking to them a lot, but as they got accustomed to that, they started playing better. They started being more confident. They started believing in themselves that they can get the job done, and that's what it was all about. I'm a 7-year professional now, from a guy who had 3 surgeries in 22 months. You know what I mean? Who comes back from that and still plays basketball? Have people ask me all the time, how did you do that? Like, I would have stopped at the first injury and stuff like that. And my thing was, when you love something so much that you kind of don't feel right without it, that is when you know, like, you're gonna do it at all costs.
It felt unique because the location, one, and also coming into I knew immediately that this was a very talented team on the court, but the location, like, I was like, my dorm is just on a city block, and then the gym is on a city block, and I'm just gonna, all my classes, I'm walking through the city, I'm like, how am I gonna find these class buildings? They look like normal buildings in a city. So it was just a very unique experience, and I grew to love it. But then after being around the guys and seeing the team and the players that we had, I knew my experience was going to be great on the floor as well, because we had so much talent. We had a good coaching staff, and they had been building. They went to the NCAA tournament, and now I was coming from a program that hadn't had much success recently, so I could feel the energy and the vibe of the team, and everyone was just eager for more. And it was an exciting time in Foggy Bottom. During my time at GW, we had some great moments in the Smith Center. One that pops to mind was my second or third game in a Colonials uniform, and we played number 6 UVA at home in the Smith Center, and it was the loudest game I'd ever been a part of. They had students like behind the basket. That's when they had the bleachers down there. It was packed, and we were able to beat them, and everyone stormed the court, and that kind of set the tone for the year that we had. Another memory in the Smith Center that is near and dear to me was my senior night. It was kind of an out-of-body experience. I mean, it was one of my best games at GW, and we were able to beat the regular season champ Dayton. My senior year was an up-and-down season, but we were able to finish on a high note in the regular season, and those are two of the memories that stick out the most to me. And even in my sit-out year, I remember Joe McDonald had a tip-in against Dayton, and me and Matt Hart running from the bench onto the floor to celebrate with everyone in our shirt and tie. And I have a lot of special memories in the Smith Center, and the energy and excitement in there when it was a huge game was second to none. Obviously, the highlight for me and what I'll talk about with all my former teammates every March is when we were able to win the NIT in Madison Square Garden. It was just an unbelievable experience. At first, there was disappointment because we weren't able to make the NCAA tournament. We had one or two bad weeks during the season, and that cost us, which was tough, but we were able to beat Hofstra the first game at home, and then before you know it, we were rolling and we were cutting down the nets in New York. And one of my favorite memories is the bus ride home after we won, because we came home the night that we won, and there was some craziness going on the bus, but it was just the perfect way to commemorate our season and ending on such a high note. I mean, we were one of only a handful of teams to win their last game of the season, and that's like something that not many players can ever say. So to be with that group who I still have a good bond with and connection, and that was a special time in my career. Going to Japan for our foreign tour was an unbelievable experience, especially with the chosen one with us, Yuta Watanabe. It was just an amazing experience on so many levels, but in terms of Yuta, from the first day I came on campus and met him outside the Smith Center, and he was so shy and timid and could barely speak the language, to then fast forward 3 years and we're going to his home country and playing in front of fans, and it wasn't normally foreign trips. You go and from what I've heard from other guys, you play in small arenas, you play in front of a couple hundred fans unless you're Duke or something. But we went to Japan and we played in front of 5,000 people for 4 games because of Yuta. After one game, everyone's on the bus and there's people lined from the doorway of the gym to the bus, and everyone's waiting for Yuta. And Mojo always used to tell the story that a woman kind of threw her baby at Yuta, and it was just unbelievable because you had heard things like he's the LeBron James of Japan, but you're like, Yuta, really? But then it was crazy. It was unbelievable, and the support he has from Japan, and to be able to experience that with him and also experience his culture, I thought meant a lot to him, and it was an experience that I'll never forget.
Thank you so much again to Tyler and Maurice Creek for sitting down and talking with me during their own daylight hours earlier this week as we commemorate Hoops in History. We are going to get to questions, but I know that we are above an hour, and a lot of folks are zoomed out in this pandemic. So what I do want to say is, for those of you who have had enough, we totally understand it. Thank you so much for joining us to celebrate Hoops in History. I encourage you to learn more about GW's Bicentennial by visiting gwsports.com/bicentennial. And we are very hopeful that we will have ourselves a normal Smith Center that's rocking again once more. However, if you are interested in sticking with us, we're going to bring the panel back and ask a few questions for the next 10 or 15 minutes. And bring in some of the really great questions that came from our community. So if our friends could please turn on their mics and their their cameras. Coach Talent, I'm going to start this question with you. This is a question that starts with Michael LaPlace, and then I'm going to ask everyone just briefly to sort of touch on that experience. Walt, I guess maybe you didn't have the experience of playing in the Smith Center, but Coach Talent, as the coach who opened the Charles E. Smith Center, what was it like for you in terms of when you opened this building right here? What did it mean for the men's basketball program? And then I'm going to ask each of the guys who had the ability to play in the building to talk about what that the experience of playing in the Smith Center was like for them. But Coach, if you don't mind unmuting yourself and letting us know what it was like when the Smith Center opened. Coach, if you could just unmute your microphone, please. Feels like every meeting I've had for the last year, so it's totally normal.
Unmute.
There we go.
I tell you how good it was. When we first moved into the Smith Center in November of '75, we didn't have hot water for a month, and not one player had one bad thing to say. Coming from the Tin Tabernacle and being able to play in a classy place like Smith Center was something. And we had a really good team, and it was joy, and we hadn't played in front of big crowds like that before. At Fort Myers, we had some nice crowds, but nothing like Smith Center. So it was really special.
Mike, as a guy who was, one of the legends of the Smith Center in the 1980s, what was it like for you to be playing in that building and having folks coming in and seeing you right on campus? We're 0 for 2 on unmuting ourselves. Mike, do you mind turning off the mute?
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
All this technology, they didn't have computers when I was at GW. No, but I mean, it was great. I mean, when you're on campus, the students are able to be there. And we were talking earlier last week that during my time there, almost started that kind of palestra type of atmosphere of throwing the toilet paper on the floor once we made the first basket. And it was just great. The Smith Center was rocking, and I love to hear the other guys and their stories and those fine memories. But when you think about it, when you're playing basketball, it's nothing like playing on campus and getting some big time wins. And we did that at the Smith Center.
And then Chris and TJ, especially as hometown guys, what was it like for you to be able to play on campus, close to home? And TJ, again, I showed up on campus the year after you graduated, but I remember waiting outside that building for 3 hours, 4 hours, 10 hours, depending on the game, during that era of GW basketball and the way those wooden bleachers would shake. And I was certain we were all going to go down on those at some point and just collapse to the floor. But being able to be in that environment at home, what does it mean for you guys to be able to do that locally?
Chris, you don't want to go first? You're the older dude. You don't want to chime in?
He's a little slower because he's older.
Age before beauty, I guess. So, I mean, for me, it was one of the biggest things was the fact that everybody from my neighborhood and friends get to come see me play. And then, and what was special about the Smith Center when they had those bleachers, after the games we won, I used to jump into the student section. I used to stand on the scoreboard and then jump into the student section and celebrate with the fans. So that was one of the best memories I had playing in the Smith Center. And the atmosphere, I knew what the atmosphere was going to be like before I stepped foot on campus my freshman year. In high school, I got a chance to play in the Smith Center, and we sold out the Smith Center for the Good Counsel, the Mather game, and Red Auerbach was there, and the whole GW team was there with Shantay and all those guys. And it was amazing to see that support and see everybody. And so that was the first time I saw it was shaking, and it was awesome.
For me, the Smith Center it's great. Like that's small, but it can get so loud. I mean, I remember like you've seen it on TV, obviously during the Shantay days and stuff like that, but it's nothing like being there and playing in it. Like my senior night, it was sold out. I remember we beat Dayton, and fortunately for me, I hit a game-winning shot, and then the students stormed the floor. Those are memories that you can never like forget. It was just being there and that like small atmosphere and having that home court advantage, having that energy from the student section, it being loud where you can't even think straight. Like I'm speechless. Like, I just love the Smith Center so much that sometimes you can't even put it into words.
Well, what I'm going to do now is Walt, I'm going to start the first question with you on this one. And, you know, Coach Talent, you, as the oldest member of this call right now, who began your career at GW in 1967, that's ignoring 60 years prior of GW basketball. That includes greats like Corky Devlin, Joe Hollop, Bill Reinhart, who Red Auerbach said taught him the fast break. So we want to make sure that we're recognizing that there's a lot more GW history that came before all of us on this call. But Walt, I'll start with you. The question came in. You've had an opportunity to see, you know, your teammates and then a lot of players following, and this one's going to be a tough one. Who do you think is the best all-time GW basketball player? Walt, we'll start with you.
Wow, that's a hard one. I would have to say Joe Hollop, based upon what he accomplished. I mean, I remember when we got the media guide, all the records were held by Joe Hollop, which was, I think, in the mid-50s. Mm-hmm. He seemed like he was a great player. He was played under Bill Reinhart, and I think he probably has to go number one.
And Joe Hollop, if I'm not mistaken, had 2,000 points and 2,000 rebounds on a team that was top 10 in the nation. Really a remarkable player at that time. Coach Talent, you've been in the Smith Center for quite some time, and you got to know as a coach and player the players who also came before you. Best player all time, who do you think?
I'm like Walt. I mean, if you look at the statistics, Joe Hollop, you'd have to pick him, but I like that guy in the right corner, Mr. Monroe. He was a pretty good player. He still holds. He scored all the points. He scored more than Joe did, which is pretty amazing. And then Mike Brown. You know, I mean, he probably did better in the pros than anybody. So it's close. It's close.
Mike, before we turn it over to the all-time leading scorer and let him, you know, talk about how great he is, Mike, tell me about what you've seen, you know, from your own career and from watching GW. Who do you call the greatest all time?
You know, that's tough. I mean, when I remember me being at GW, and when I looked at the statistics, and I agree with Walt, I looked at Joe Hollop, and I saw that he had like 2,000 something rebounds. I'm like, well, I thought that was just like incredible. I mean, when you look at what he's done, I didn't know until you just mentioned now about how good his teams he played on was. But for me, you know, it would have to be Joe Hollop, because to lead in both categories is something special at a university.
And it must mean you also have teammates who know how to miss a lot of shots too. TJ, who do you think? Or you force the opponent to miss a lot of shots. TJ, best player all time.
I'm gonna, you know, it's gonna pain for me to say this, but I'm a little biased because part of the reason why I went to GW is because of Chris. So I'm gonna have to go with my big brother. I'm gonna have to go with Chris Monroe because I've seen all the work and all the stuff. I've never seen someone shoot as many free throws in their career as he has, but you know, I'm gonna ride with Mr. Monroe.
All right, Chris, who's the greatest player of all time?
I'm gonna take a different approach, right? I think I would defer to the elder statesmen because they've seen the generations, they've seen the game transition through over time. So, you know, of course, as a player, and all these guys on here, you know, in a one-on-one matchup would say they will win the game. If I say I'll play Mike one-on-one, he's gonna say he's gonna beat me. So this is a. But I would say you got to do it by position. I think we've had a lot of great point guards. We had a lot of great shooting guards, centers, forwards. It's hard to really say who's the best because everybody's role on that team was different, and you played to your circumstances, right? So, I mean, I scored a lot of points in my career based off of, you know, the situation I had. I had TJ Thompson come in and basically, you know, save me after a coaching change, you know. But then other guys that could have scored a lot of points had sacrificed that opportunity to help the team win, you know. So I mean, it's not statistical. It's really about just the guys and the areas that they're playing because the game is so transitional. So I can't call it. I'll leave it to the elder statesman to make that call.
Oh, you see, he works for GW, right? You see, that was the political answer right there.
Listen, his next job is at the State Department because the diplomacy is just unbelievable. He's just going to walk right down the street and sit a desk down that way.
One of the things that is different, some guys got to play 4 years on the varsity.
Exactly.
And some only got to play 3. My youngest brother, you know, Pat, talent, was a tremendous player. He scored 1,750 points in 3 years and hit 50% from the floor and 85% from the foul. And if he had played, he had his 4th year, he would have been right there with Chris Monroe and Joe Holt as far as points. He had never gotten 20 rebounds a game. But the best offensive rebounder was Walt Zerbiak. Walt was unbelievable. He just had a nose for it. I think you're born with that. But he made a living on. He played with Mike and I, and we shot the ball every time it come down the floor. And Walt, every time we missed it, he'd grab it and put it back in. And he was a master at it.
And you got to also think about the influence of the 3-point line coming in later as well, because depending on where you're shooting, if you're Pat Talent, there's a lot of points he left out on the floor because there was no 3-point line at the time, right?
Oh yeah. We used to shoot threes.
Exactly.
We didn't know any difference. I mean, that was just a normal shot for us. My gosh, if we could have got a 3-pointer for a 20-footer, I mean, that's easy. I'm honestly. The 3-point shot. Now it's a little bit further out. They've got it to the point where I think it's a good shot. But when they first started, right at the top of the key, I mean, Lord, we could shoot those with our eyes closed.
It would have added 10 points to your scoring average for sure. I'm serious, because a lot of your shots were from out there.
Yeah. Well, you know how we were the first time. As soon as we got open, let her fly. It kills me today to watch these teams that with the 30-second clock, they can't get a shot off. Can you imagine? We with our teams one time, we were going to play somewhere. I don't know. They had a shot clock, and so we were all scared. So we had a scrimmage and to see if how long it took us to shoot. And the longest it took either team was 17 seconds. And the next longest was 13 seconds. So I don't know why. It seems like now they go down the court and they mess around for 15 seconds before they really start, trying to score. Of course, the defense is real good, don't get me wrong, but it seems funny that you can't get a shot off in 30 seconds. TJ, you could get a shot off in 30 seconds, I'm pretty sure.
When in doubt.
We've gone well over our time, and I want to thank the fans for sticking with us. We've got a lot of great questions here. I'm going to encourage, for the folks who are using the Twitter, send that tweet to Buff Blue Fund, BUFFBLUEFUND, or you can email your question to buffblue@gwu.edu, and we'll drop that into the chat as well. We'd love to be able to follow up with you individually on getting your questions answered. I would be more than happy to talk to these guys and get some of these questions answered outside this call, if you'll be willing to permit me later on as we go. It's because we want to keep our fans engaged. But I do want to close this out with one last question, and we'll just go right down the line in the order that we spoke before. When you look back on your GW basketball career, what is it that you're most proud of? It could be what you achieved on the floor. It could be how something else beyond that. But what are you most proud of, Coach Talent?
Oh, just being able to, when I got kicked off the team in Kentucky, it was a very tough thing for me. And you can imagine growing up there, and playing for 3 years, but being able to find a school that I actually liked more than Kentucky, it was just like, I can't believe it happened, because I was very, very fortunate. But I want to say one more thing. Walt, your son is a tremendous TV commentator. You tell him that when you see him. He's the best one on the bunch, I think. He's definitely the most knowledgeable. But anyway, just wanted to say that.
Well, and you tell him that him dancing in front of whatever those things were was also one of the stranger things I've seen on television. Watching him and Clark Kellogg dancing in front of those little computer-generated guys with the Sweet 16 was very, very strange. But Walt, your favorite memory all time, and what are you most proud of being a GW basketball alum?
Well, I appreciate the fact that it was a stepping stone for me, to continue a career after I left GW. I was lucky enough, as I said, to play in the ABA, played in the Eastern League, and luckily played in Europe for 10 years, and playing for Real Madrid for 7, in which we were European Cup champions 3 times and 3 times Intercontinental Cup champions. But one of the things that I find so proud is after I retired from basketball, I went to interview with the NBA because I knew they were going to do things internationally. So I had an interview with David Stern. And one of the questions he asked me is, where'd you go to school? And I was very, very pleased with the reaction he gave me when I told him I went to GW. His eyes looked up. He says, that means you have a pretty good intellectual level and an academic level. So it really, really made me feel good. And that's one of the things that I remember most.
Thank you so much, Walt. Mike, what's your favorite? What are you most proud of being a GW alum?
It's funny. I'm looking to try to copy Walt there, but the thing is, the prestige that George Washington University holds as an academic institution. The fact that for my travels, around the globe, in the U.S., and when you say, "Oh, GW," it's like, "Oh, okay." It's like that's like almost Ivy League, So it carries a lot of weight. I didn't realize it as a student athlete because I'm there, I'm going to class, I'm playing ball. I'm not really thinking about life after GW. But then when basketball is over and you're going out there in the real world, it carries a lot of weight. And I'm very proud the fact of being a graduate of George Washington.
TJ?
Me, it's three things. One is graduating from GW. I mean, that degree in itself, like everyone said, is just phenomenal. The second thing was being able to be a part of the first team to ever win the Atlantic 10 Conference Championship, to bring that home. That's everything. And the last, most important thing is meeting my wife there at GW. So I think that those are the three good things that it has done for me.
And Chris, I'm going to let you finish us out with the last answer. What are you most proud of here at GW?
I would say for me, it's really the relationships. At the end of the day, through the relationships I built playing with guys on my team, my brotherhood with TJ, I knew him as a kid, but the fact that he came there with me, to the alumni, to the relationships I built with Bob, to it's just amazing the type of people that you meet. And like Mike said, when you go and say, "Where'd you go to school?" I went to GW. They're like, "Oh," and the places that our alums hold spaces, we have real estate, and I think that's important to notice. So I think for me, it's more sort of relationships and the brotherships that the bond that I've had with guys throughout the years and continue to build.
Well, I want to say on behalf of all the fans, right, as someone who spent a lot of time rooting you guys on, you provided a place for us to develop relationships of our own, cheering folks like you on, and a place that we continue to be able to call home in the Smith Center, or whether it's seeing you guys, the current team, either here in Foggy Bottom or elsewhere around the country and sometimes around the world, where all of our alumni are. Folks, I want to say thank you so much. I want to say thank you so much to Coach Talent, to Walt Zerbiak, Mike Brown, Chris Monroe, and TJ Thompson for helping us celebrate 115 years of GW men's basketball as part of our bicentennial celebration. Once again, I'm going to encourage you to visit gwsports.com/bicentennial and learn more about how we're commemorating 200 years of the George Washington University. If you'd like to learn more about us, always visit us at gwsports.com. Keep in touch. Send us your questions. I'd love to follow up with you with some of these great men in the very near future. And thank you so much to all of you who joined us this evening. I hope all of you have a wonderful night. And guys, thank you so much for joining us on the call. We really appreciate y'all.
All right. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.